Okay, so fractions at the finish line. The directions say to use the information in the charts to answer the questions. Sorry, it's a little bit blurry, guys. This is as good as it's going to get. Um, Barbara, Donna, Cindy, and Nicole ran in a relay race. Their times are listed in the chart. So we've got a chart with 4 girls, and they ran this fast. Okay, except we're missing Cindy's. So I have an idea that's going to probably want us to find Cindy's. They're not going to make it easy for us. Let's see what number 1 says. It says the 4 girls ran in a relay race as a team. Each girl ran one part of the race. The team's total time was 11 3/5 of a minute. What was Cindy's time? Okay, we know we don't know Cindy's time. But what we do know is that all of the girls ran in 11 3/5 of a minute. And we can add the other 3 girls that we do know and subtract the whole time. And when we do that, that's going to give us Cindy's time. So here's how you set that problem up. Now, you may need an extra piece of paper, guys. Not everything is going to fit in this one area, and you can always send me a picture of your extra piece of paper. If you're typing, you may be able to get it to fit, but sometimes it's hard to type fractions in the boxes. Okay, so here we have 11 3/5. And that was the team's total time. We're going to subtract that from all the girls' times that we know. All right, so I'm going to do this on a separate sheet of paper here. First, I'm just going to come and do that part. Okay, so I'm going to do 3 3/10 plus 2 4/5 plus 2 1/10. To add these fractions, I'm going to pull out the whole number of the mixed number. Okay, so I'm going to set my problem up. 3 plus 2 plus 2. That was each of the whole numbers pulled up, because when you have a fraction like 3 3/10, it's the same as saying 3 plus 3/10. Okay, you don't need that. And then you're going to add the fraction portions of all of the mixed numbers. Okay, now let's just keep on going. 3 plus 2 is 7. Now I'm going to add that to my fractions. So we're getting it a little breaking it down and then building it back up, kind of. All right. What I notice here is I've got 2 fractions with the same denominator, and this one is not. So I cannot just add straight across. I've got to find a common denominator. The only one I need to find a common denominator for is the 4/5. So I'm going to come out to the side and I'm going to do that. What can I multiply the 5 by to get to 10? Okay, we know that 5 times 2 is 10. So if I take 4/5 and I multiply the 5 times 2, and you got to do it on the top too, right? You have to do it on both sides. I'm going to get an equivalent fraction that I can add. Okay, so 4/5 times 2 over 2. Now, the easy thing about multiplication fractions is that you can go straight across the top and bottom. There's no common denominator in multiplying. Multiplying is actually easier than dividing. So 4 times 2 is 8. 5 times 2 is 10. So my new equivalent fraction is 8/10, and it now matches these common denominators. So I'm going to rewrite it with that. 7 plus. I'm going to keep 3/10 because that was already common. But now I'm going to add 8/10 instead. 8/10, okay? That's the same as that. Plus 1/10. Now we see that we have a common denominator across the board, so I can add all the numerators together. So I'm going to say 7 plus 8 plus 3 plus 1, okay? That's 12 tenths, because we don't go 10 plus 10 plus 10, we just keep it as 10, right? So this actually, remember what I said up here, this is actually 7 12/10. It reads the same. Okay, we have this ugly fraction, and the reason why I say this is an ugly fraction is because it's a mixed number and an improper fraction. Now, when we have this, that becomes something we need to fix, okay? So we're going to go down over here and we're going to fix that. I am going to pull the 7 out again, and I'm going to add something to it to make it work. Notice that 12 tenths it's almost like 10 tenths, but two more, right? It's got two more. So we can pull out 10 tenths from that fraction like this. I'm going to pull that out and it's going to leave me with 2 tenths. Like it's kind of like subtracting 10, because if you subtracted 10 from 12, you get 2. Okay, so we did that because we want the numerator to be smaller than the denominator. When you have the numerator larger, we call that an improper fraction, and we've got to fix it unless the problem tells you to leave it that way. Okay, so now I can add here. Now this 10 tenths, we're not going to add it back together because we just pulled it apart over here. But what we know about a fraction over a number over a number in a fraction, it's the same. It equals 1. So if it's 5 over 5, that equals 1. If it's 1 over 1, that equals 1. If it's a million over a million, that also equals 1. It doesn't matter what it is. So really what this is 7 plus 1 plus 2 tenths, which equals 8 and 2 tenths. 7 plus 1 is 8, and then 2 tenths. Now our fraction looks like this. So you know what we did is we solved what adding all of those times were together. That's a lot to do that, but this is what all the times are together of these girls. Let me go back and show you. This plus this equals our 8 tenths that we found, okay? But we're not done, because remember we had to take this 11 3/5 and minus all of what that equaled. So then you're going to do that. All right, so then what you're going to do is you're going to say, back to my original 11 3/5 minus this 8 and 2 tenths. All right, just like in addition, we can pull out these whole numbers. So we're going to say 11 minus 8 here. 11 minus 8, because remember we're subtracting now, but we're plussing the fraction portion, okay? Because when you have, this is just like a little plus sign, so we can't forget that. Overall, we still are subtracting. So it's going to be 11 minus 8. Oh, I do need plus here because I am going to subtract the big parts of it, okay? But when we pull out the whole number, you have to add back into the fraction. I know that's a little bit confusing. So then this becomes 11 minus 8 is 3. And then we have to do like a common denominator here, right? Yeah, because we cannot just subtract. So we're going to pull this down. So 11 minus 8 is 3 plus, and then we're going to subtract here. Look, 3/5 minus 2 tenths. But I need to make this equal to 10. So I'm going to do what we did before and just multiply it by 2 over 2. And then when we do that, we have 3 plus 3 times 2 is 6. 5 times 2 is 10, but we're still minusing those two fractions. Okay, I have a feeling that this is where most people are going to get confused, is when you subtract and add. But overall, remember, we're subtracting the problem. When you separate out your fraction from your whole number is when you are adding. You got to remember to put the sign back in there. Okay, so I can just do this straight across. So this is going to equal to 3, and 6 minus 2 is 4 tenths. All right, but I'm going to go a step further just so it's easy down the road, and I'm going to simplify or reduce this fraction. An equivalent fraction, if I divided each of these by 2, 10 by 2, because I know they have 2 in common, I could pull more out of there, and then this would be 2/5, right? Because 4 divided by 2 is 2, or actually let's do it by 4. Let's even do it bigger. 4 divided by 4 is 1. Wait, no, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stick with it by 2. I'm going to do it by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And 3, or I'm sorry, yeah. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. All right. I know that's a little messy, but the final answer is 3 2/5. I'll write it right here, 3 2/5. Now, what we found out of all this was just Cindy's time. So I'm going to go back up and I'm going to write 3 2/5 in for Cindy's time. Okay. All right, we're going to keep going. We've got another problem that we want to solve. Find the difference, number 2, between the fastest girl's time and the slowest girl's time. And to do that, you need to look at the slowest time is going to be the larger number, right? Because if you run a race in 10 seconds, then and you run a race in 5 seconds, the person who ran it in 10 seconds, the bigger number time is the slowest, right? And so we need to figure out and compare some times. All right, so first thing we want to look at is, let's see, let's decide the fastest time. So I know that these two have only 2 seconds in them. So they are definitely faster than the ones that have 3 seconds. So let's compare Donna and Nicole, because one of those two is the fastest time. When we look at 4/5, okay, or 2 1/10, let's just look at the 4/5 part and the 1/10 part. We need to estimate these fractions to see which one might be faster, because actually, if we look at let me do this on a different sheet of paper here. You don't need to really write this part down if you are copying the problems. So 4/5 is close to 5/5, right? Because if I put one more there, it'll be 5/5, which is 1. So 4/5 is almost at a whole nother second. So that's going to make Donna's time very close to 3 minutes, because it will add that other second and become 3 minutes. But if you look at Nicole's time, she has a 1/10 of a second on the end of hers. That's actually close to 0. If you look at a number line, right, and it's got 0 and 10 over here, and she's at a 1, she's very close here to 0. Whereas if you have a number line here and you're estimating it 0, 5, 10, let's see, from 0 to 5, and she's at 4, she's almost already at 5. Okay, so this is almost 1. So because this is a lower, smaller number, Nicole's time is the fastest. Okay, so I'm going to write, and it wants us to know the difference between the fastest girls and the slowest girls. I know that the higher number is going to go first. So I'm going to subtract out Nicole's time, which is 2 1/10. We've determined she's the fastest girl. Fastest. Okay, sorry, it's a little blurry. So I'm going to find out what I'm going to subtract. Well, let's look at the slowest. Same situation, 3 seconds and 3 seconds. One of these two is slower. So if this is 3/10 and this is 2/5, which one's closer? Now this can be a little bit tricky, but if you have 3 out of 10 of something, or you have 2 out of 5, you're actually closer to having more wholes with 2 out of 5. So Cindy actually is going to have the slowest time. Okay, so we're going to say 3 2/5 for Cindy, and we're going to subtract the fastest time, because remember it said the difference, and that means to take to subtract to find the difference. Okay, so here's what that looks like. I'm going to pull the whole number out, the 3 and the 2, and 3 minus 2 is 1, so I'm going to do 1. And then I'm going to do plus, because remember, when you pull the whole number out, you still got to add it back, because there's a little plus sign here that you're missing in each of these. But I'm going to do 2/5 minus 1/10, which are the two fractions. So we still have to have that minus sign, okay? Then we're going to have to find a common denominator of the 5 and the 10, which I know we want to make it 10 to make it easier. So it's going to be 1 plus, and then if I were to do 2/5 times 2/2, that's what we've been doing, right? And then subtract out the 1/10, that will give me a common denominator. So let me rewrite that. 1 plus 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 2 is 10. So my equivalent fraction to 2/5 is 4/10, so that I can then minus 1/10, because now look, I have a common denominator. So I can just take 1/10 as is and bring it over here. When I subtract, that's going to equal 1 plus 4 minus 1, 3. 10 minus 10, we don't really do that, right? We just leave it 10. So this is the same thing as putting them together, and it's 1 3/10. Okay, so the answer is the difference between the fastest and the slowest is 1 second and 3/10 of a second, 1 3/10 of a second. Okay, that's not very much, is it? Now we're going to do one more problem, and then we're going to be finished with the front side. All right. To break the school's record, the girls' time had to be faster than 12 2/5. Did they break the record? If so, how much faster? If not, how much slower? So if they wanted to break the school's record, all their times together in this relay race, which means, you're adding them together, had to be faster. Okay, well, let's do this. We have to take Cindy's time and we have to add all the girls' times up to see if they were the fastest. Okay. So let's set that up. Okay, so let's compare. 12 2/5 was the school record. Remember up here, the girls' time, total time, they already gave it to us. All right, was 11 3/5. Okay, which one is bigger or which one's slower? I guess you'd say which one's faster. The girls' time was only 11 seconds and 3/5. The record was 12 seconds and 2/5. So the girls did, yes, they broke the record because they ran faster. But we cannot forget, if so, how much faster were they? To find the difference of how much faster or how far they broke the record, you're going to subtract so you can find the difference. Okay. 12 2/5 minus 11 3/5. I can already see that my fraction portion has a common denominator. That's going to be easy peasy. So I'm going to just pull out these whole numbers and do 12 minus 11, and I'm going to get 1 plus the subtraction of my two fractions. All right, now I can say 1 plus 2. Can I do 2 minus 3? Can't do 2 minus 3. That makes a little bit more sense. What we want to try to do is do, let's see, 12 2/5 minus 11 3/5. But again, we don't have the numbers in the right order. We would get a negative number if we tried to do that. And we're not ready for negative numbers yet. But the first thing I do want to go ahead and do, and we started to do this a minute ago, we're going to do 12 minus 11 is 1. All right, so we're going to do 1 plus 2/5 minus 3/5. And we know that we can't do that. So here's where I was kind of messing up a little bit before. Let's do this instead. Let's take apart from this 2/5. It's kind of how I did over here when I was adding back into the whole number, but I want to do it this way so that it makes more sense to you. But what we're going to do is we're going to take 5 over 5. So we're going to say 1 plus a whole out of that, which is 5 over 5, right? Because that's a whole. And then we're going to add that into the 2/5. Because when I do that, I can now add this straight across and make a bigger fraction of 7/5. Okay. So we are going to have 11 7/5 is going to be what we end up with. So 11 7/5. Now I can subtract 11 3/5 from that. And the 11s are going to cancel out. And then I've got 7/5 minus 3/5 with a common denominator. 7 minus 3 is 4, 5. So 4/5 is my answer. So they broke the school record by just 4/5. And I apologize, there might be some erasing, or you might need to re-watch this into the recording to get your answer. But you are not going to have to turn in the back or the second page of this. This page you can omit. So when you're turning this into me, don't worry about turning this in. I only want to see this. And then I need to see as much work so that I can see that you followed along the video as possible. So the more work you get, the more credit you will get for this. All right. Thanks for watching. Got to stop recording.